What would you do if the people who were supposed to protect you, believe in you, and fight for you decided you weren't worth the effort? Not because you failed, not because you gave up, but because in their eyes you were a bad bet, a poor investment, someone not worth backing. That question followed me for years, long before I ever stood on a graduation stage in front of thousands of people and watched my parents' faces turn white with shock. Long before applause drowned out everything they never said to me. Long before I finally understood that sometimes the greatest success isn't proving others wrong, but surviving the moment they decide you don't matter. My name is Lillian Harper. I'm a woman in my early 20s, born and raised in the United States, and this is the story of how my parents chose my sister over me, how I was told I wasn't worth investing in, and how that decision changed the entire direction of my life. But this story doesn't begin with a graduation ceremony. It begins years earlier, inside a quiet suburban house, on an ordinary evening that permanently altered how I saw my family and myself. I grew up in a household that looked perfect from the outside: neatly trimmed lawn, matching holiday decorations, family photos framed and lined along the hallway wall. If you didn't live there, you'd never guess something was wrong. But inside those walls, there was a hierarchy, and I learned very early where I stood. I have a sister, Alina. She's 15 months older than me, close enough in age that people assumed we were inseparable. Twins, sometimes, if they weren't paying attention. But from the moment we could walk and talk, it was clear we weren't equal. Alina was magnetic, confident, loud in the best way. She made teachers laugh, coaches adored her. Parents of her friends complimented my mom on raising such an impressive daughter. I was quieter, observant. I did well in school, but I didn't shine. I didn't demand attention. I didn't know how to compete for it. My parents noticed the difference early. At first, it was subtle. Alina's accomplishments were celebrated loudly. Mine were acknowledged politely. If Alina brought home an A, it was proof of her brilliance. If I did the same, it was expected. By the time we were teenagers, the difference was no longer subtle. When Alina turned 16, my parents surprised her with a brand new car parked in the driveway with a red bow on the hood. They took photos, posted them online, talked about how proud they were of her responsibility and maturity. When I turned 16, they handed me the keys to Alina's old laptop. The battery barely held a charge. The screen had a crack down the corner. My mom smiled apologetically and said, "We just can't afford to do everything twice." But somehow, they could afford Alina's summer programs, her extracurricular trips, her expensive hobbies. Somehow, there was always money when it was for her. I always noticed, but I didn't complain. I learned early that complaining only confirmed what they already believed about me, that I was difficult, overly sensitive, and not worth the trouble. Everything came to a head the spring we graduated high school. College acceptance letters arrived on the same day. I remember it vividly. A Tuesday afternoon. The mailbox creaked open, 2 thick envelopes and 1 thin one. Alina got into Brookhaven University, a private school with a national reputation and a price tag that made my stomach twist when I looked it up online. Over $60,000 a year. I got into North Valley State, a solid public university, not glamorous but respected, less than half the cost. I was proud of myself, genuinely proud. I carried my acceptance letter around the house like proof that I wasn't invisible. That evening, my father called a family meeting. He always did that when something serious was coming. He sat in his leather chair, posture straight, hands folded like he was preparing to deliver a business presentation. My mother sat on the couch, already tense. Alina stood near the window, smiling, glowing with excitement. I sat across from my father, heart pounding, acceptance letter folded carefully in my hands. "We need to discuss college," my father said, "specifically finances." Alina nodded eagerly. "I know Brookhaven is expensive, but—" "We've decided to cover it," he interrupted. "All of it, tuition, housing, meals." Alina gasped and rushed forward, hugging him. My mother smiled, relief washing over her face like this decision had been weighing on her too. Then my father turned to me. "Lillian," he said, and something in his tone made my chest tighten. "We've decided not to pay for your education." At first, I thought I'd misheard him. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. He sighed. "We can't do everything for everyone. Alina's education is an investment. She has leadership qualities. She knows how to network. She's the kind of person who will benefit from a place like Brookhaven." I swallowed hard. North Valley is cheaper. I can work. I can commute. He shook his head. "This isn't about cost alone." The room felt smaller. "So what is it about?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "Return on investment." The words hit me harder than anything he could have shouted. "You're smart," he continued, "but you're not exceptional. You'll be fine anywhere. Alina needs this opportunity more, and frankly, it makes sense." I looked at my mother, waiting for her to speak. She stared at her hands. "So I just figure it out?" I asked. My father shrugged. "You're resourceful. You always have been." That night, I went to my room and closed the door quietly. I didn't cry. I felt hollow, like something essential had been confirmed. To my parents, I wasn't a daughter worth fighting for. I was a risk they didn't want to take. What they didn't know was that, in making that decision, they set off a chain of events they would never be able to control. The favoritism didn't suddenly disappear after that conversation. If anything, it became more obvious. My parents talked constantly about Alina's future, her connections, her opportunities. They never asked how I planned to afford school. They never asked if I was scared. A few weeks later, I found my mother's phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. A message thread with my aunt caught my eye. "She'll manage," my mother had written. "She always does. Alina just has more potential." That was the moment something inside me shifted permanently. That night, I opened my laptop, the broken one, and started searching. Scholarships, grants, work-study programs, anything. I did the math over and over. Tuition, rent, books, food, transportation. The numbers didn't add up, not even close. I had 3 options: take out massive loans, drop out before I even started, or work myself to exhaustion and hope I survived. I chose the third. The summer before college, I worked 2 jobs, one at a coffee shop, one cleaning offices at night. I saved every dollar. I applied for every scholarship I could find, even the ones that felt impossible. I found a tiny room in a shared house near campus. No privacy, no air conditioning, but it was cheap. When Alina left for Brookhaven, my parents threw her a farewell dinner. They gave speeches, took photos. I wasn't included. When I left for North Valley, my mother hugged me quickly and said, "Call if you need anything." I knew better than to believe that. College was brutal. I woke up before dawn to work shifts at the cafe, went to classes all day, studied until midnight, slept 4 or 5 hours if I was lucky. I missed social events. I skipped meals. I learned how to survive on instant noodles and caffeine. Alina posted photos online. Football games, parties, weekend trips. She looked happy. Thanksgiving came and I stayed on campus. When I called home, my father was busy. Alina was laughing in the background. I hung up and scrolled through social media until I saw the photo. 3 chairs, 3 plates, 3 smiles. I stared at it for a long time. That was the night I stopped hoping they'd change. Second semester, I took a class that changed everything. Dr. Susan Caldwell taught advanced economics. She was known for being tough, brilliant, and impossible to impress. I sat in the front row and took meticulous notes. I turned in my first paper expecting a decent grade. It came back with an A+ and a note. "Come see me." I was terrified. She looked at me over her glasses and said, "This is one of the strongest papers I've read in years." I didn't know what to say. "Have you ever heard of the Horizon Fellowship?" she asked. I nodded slowly. Everyone had. Full scholarship, nationally competitive, nearly impossible. "You should apply," she said. "I'm not that kind of student," I replied automatically. She smiled. "You are, you just don't know it yet." The next 2 years were relentless. I worked harder than I ever thought possible. I maintained a perfect GPA. I skipped holidays. I sacrificed sleep. There were nights I cried alone in my car because I was so tired of being strong. There were moments I almost quit. But I didn't. Junior year, Dr. Caldwell nominated me for the fellowship. The application process was grueling. Essays, interviews, background checks, recommendations. I didn't tell my family. The email arrived early one morning my senior year. I read it sitting on the curb outside the cafe, hands shaking. I'd been selected. Full tuition, living stipend, and the opportunity to transfer to one of the fellowship's partner universities for my final year. One of those universities was Brookhaven, Eliner's school. I transferred quietly. I didn't tell my parents. 3 weeks into the semester, Eliner saw me in the library. "What are you doing here?" she asked, stunned. "I go here," I said calmly. "How?" "Scholarship." She didn't know what to say. Neither did I. Graduation came quickly. I wore honors regalia, a sash, a medallion. My parents sat in the front row, cameras ready for Eliner. When my name was announced as the keynote speaker, their faces drained of color. I spoke about resilience, about being told you weren't worth the investment, about learning to invest in yourself. I didn't name them. I didn't have to. Afterward, my parents tried to apologize, to explain. I listened. "I'm not angry," I said, "but I'm not the same person anymore." And that was true. I moved away. I started my career. I built a life that belonged to me. My parents and I are still navigating what comes next, slowly, carefully. But I'm not waiting anymore. Hear what I learned. You can't force someone to see your worth. You can only decide to see it yourself. If you've ever been overlooked, if you've ever been told you weren't enough, I want you to know something. You are. And if this story resonated with you, this is Real Calm Stories. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your story matters too.